Well, thanks everyone for coming to my talk. I'll be talking about supporting and growing ATProto development in 2025 and beyond. Thank you for letting me talk and to discuss these topics. I'm more than a little bit nervous. Public speaking is not my forte, so we'll see how this goes. I'm wearing a lot of green today. Can everyone in the back see me? Yeah, good, cool, all right. Yeah, so a bit about me. I'll spare the really long, self-indulgent kind of autobiography bit I did for the ATProto talks. I did about 4 or 5 months ago, something like that. But most people know me as the creator of the news and trending news feeds on Blue Sky, as well as the creator of XBlock, as well as the kind of architect of the Bluemoji spec, and I do some writing and stuff on top of that. I'll talk a little bit about the news feeds today. I'll talk a little bit about XBlock today. Not so much about Bluemoji today. It's still a project I really am planning on getting back to, but I've just had a bit of a challenging couple of months this year so far, suffice to say. So I'm going to be mostly talking about the first two things. Where did the news feed and trending news come from? I have been on Blue Sky since, I think, May 2023. I was in the 65,000 user sort of bracket of people who had joined. So I was there pretty early. I've been working in news media since 2013, various titles, mostly kind of like larger business titles. And what informs a lot of my development on ATProto, as well as like ActivityPub before that, is a deep interest in journalism and a deep desire to get these topics right. I build code projects so I can understand the technologies that are driving these platforms better, and it sometimes yields really kind of cool things as a result of that. I created a list. It was at that time just a block list because they didn't have informative lists on Blue Sky back when I created the initial news list. And my goal for it was to create a verified source of news media titles that were posting on Blue Sky. There was a previous news feed kind of before that, but it shut down due to the author not wanting to do it anymore. And so my feed was kind of there, and I stood up and said, hey, this now exists, and people started gravitating towards it. And after a while, Blue Sky started including it with user onboarding and in the main feeds list, and it just kind of grew from there. And eventually, I was able to make it so that there's now a trending version of the feed, so that you can get whatever is popular in sort of like a algorithmically ordered version. My two big requirements for the news feed are that all titles have domain verifiable handles. That way I can know that it's actually the news org that's publishing instead of somebody with an RSS bot somewhere. And also that they produce original journalism. It's not just like an aggregator. This has been great because it's kind of allowed me to bully the world's news orgs into using a primary affordance of the platform. I think a big part of why news orgs are all now using domain handles, not just because it is like very obviously the thing that they should be doing as a organization that is presenting themselves as, you know, a source of trust within the world, but also because everybody else was doing it, and also they wanted the access to my feed, which has increased a lot of their traffic kind of over the years. Other thing I made was XBlock, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a third-party labeler that uses a machine learning algorithm that I trained to classify images on Blue Sky from the fire hose as a screenshot from a social network. So you can get a content warning saying, oh, this image is actually a Twitter screenshot. Doesn't say what's in it, doesn't say what kind of Twitter screenshot. Maybe it's a joke, maybe it's rage bait. Like, it just tells you that this is a Twitter screenshot and you can choose to look at it or not. This has had a very positive effect, I think, for a lot of people's mental health on the platform. They're able to avoid a lot of the negative news coming over from Twitter and just the general kind of animus that is perpetually emanating from the platform. And I've kept on for a while. I'll be talking a lot about Bluemoji because it was, I think, is short of the first-party labeler, the oldest third-party labeler on Blue Sky. I was following the pull requests for adding third-party labeler support to Blue Sky, like while they were still being in development. So I was like one of the very, very first people to be able to stand up a service once that functionality landed. And it's been a bit of a journey. I'm going to talk a little bit about that journey. So yeah, why does ATProto development need funding, and how do we get there? This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because I've had to run a lot of infrastructure out of my flat over the years. The first XBlock server was running off of like a Raspberry Pi in my partner's bedroom for the longest time. I still do all the inference for XBlock off of an old gaming PC that's sitting in my like home office. And I've also paid out of pocket for a lot of cloud hosting. And what I've kind of found over the years is like the third-party features and technologies that allow you to do things like my feeds, like my labeler on Blue Sky, are like so really well integrated within the platform that it's sometimes hard for users to understand that there are people who aren't Blue Sky making these things. I frequently get, told to add GIFs to Blue Sky or whatever because they think I work for Blue Sky. Because why would the primary newsfeed on the platform be run by somebody who's not a Blue Sky employee? But I think that's like it speaks to the power of what Blue Sky is willing to let us do with these technologies and be able to stand up really critical services that are very widely used by like a lot of people. And there's not a lot of support that people who are doing just hobbyist projects like mine quite often get. You can apply for grants, and I did apply for an ATProto grant for XBlock at one point, which has meant that I've not really ever paid for any of the heavier server, Firehose consumer stuff. It's all on AWS because that was part of the grant. But mostly third-party developers like me are reliant on donations from people who believe in the mission of that project. And shout out to Patrick Singletary for being like one of the sole people to constantly be flagging, hey, authors have donation pages here. If you really enjoy this project, contribute back to it. This is a possibility. You can, give to these projects. But we do need to get better at asking for help. At the same time, it's really hard to fund these things when you're just an individual or like a group of friends who are putting something together to try and make your experience on the platform a bit better. And like given this, like is it any wonder there's like kind of a deficit of professional, well-run labelers when the risk, time, hosting, and frustration costs are super high for them. And I'll be talking a little bit about those frustrations as I go into here. A lot of this experience stems from my existence in the trans community. We had a very big, well-defined third-party moderation experiment kind of earlier in Blue Sky's life, and it fizzled out for a lot of reasons. And I'm not going to go into any other reasons. I'm not going to talk about it. I guess it all wasn't at all involved with it, but I can appreciate some of the frustrations and challenges that they experienced as a labeler while they were existing. And to ask another question, how do we use the incredible foundation that ATProto has given us to stand up new services and platforms? And how can we use this to both protect and give voice to marginalized communities, such as mine? Next slide. So here's my idea. Monetizing custom feeds on Blue Sky could be the single most effective way to support the growth and ongoing maintenance of community initiatives. To be able to do this, feeds need to be able to mark promoted posts as paid for to comply with local advertising legislation. Feeds like mine, which show surface news content, really need to be able to do this because how do you tell whether a post is an ad or if it's a first-party piece of journalism without that kind of labeling? This is a challenging subject matter, and I've consistently gotten the sense from people working at Blue Sky that this is a really big challenge that they still need to kind of work through when they're already dealing with a million other fires that they're currently firefighting. So I can appreciate this is probably the last thing they want to think about at the moment. But if we get this right, the rewards are huge. And it's a rare opportunity to do things better. When I was working on Bluemoji initially, I was really cautious that anything I was doing with Bluemoji might cause issues with the rest of the network, might cause headaches for Blue Sky, whatnot. So I talked with Brian quite a bit, and I think it was Brian who introduced me to the concept of rusting something open. It's rusted open. It's been open for so long that you can't shut it because it's been rusted open. And maybe there's a rare opportunity to do this with monetizing content on Blue Sky. and I'll get there. But first, let's talk a little bit about those 2 meltdowns I had. And I promise you, I'm not trying to be self-indulgent here. I'm not trying to be cute of all this. I'm being really vulnerable about all of this, so please bear with me. Thank you. And I say all this to kind of express some of the challenges and difficulties that labelers especially face, and third-party moderation and composable moderation in general. So the first one was launching XBlock. At that point, I had just deployed Ozone pretty much. I hadn't trained the machine vision model. I didn't have any volunteers helping me out. It was entirely all manual. The first, I'd say, probably 3,000-4,000 labels that were generated by XBlock were all completely manual. I set up like a queue so that I could manually flag things, and whenever an image showed up that resembled a screenshot, I would then add it to the training set and be able to then gradually train the model off of that. This was extremely painful, endless, strenuous, mind-numbingly dull work that frequently became soul-crushing just due to the nature of the rage bait screenshots that I was having to see day in, day out, all the time. The meltdown happened when I was with my partner in Brighton. My partner is an electronic musician, and they were playing a gig at one of the bars in Brighton. And it was just like really the first, I think, weekend that XBlock was really running in any meaningful capacity. And I was looking at Ozone on my mobile phone, trying to clear this queue that was starting to grow. And I was now being the sole curator of, ultimately, this list of reports about screenshots that hadn't been labeled that I then had to manually label and, action. And I went through, a couple screens of screenshots, sitting at the edge of the dance floor while electronic music is thundering around me, and I was like, cool, I cleared the queue, and I, went and danced a little bit, and then came back an hour later and looked at my phone again, and the queue had like doubled in size. There's this brand new queue to curate, or not curate, but to clear. And so I did that, and I just tried to get on with my evening. The next morning, I started to see some of those labels show up on Blue Sky, and I clicked them, and I had hidden like the really triggering content, and I could see that I had done something like really cool with this. I saw there was value to this, and it encouraged me to keep going. That I should really pursue this and try and make it a reality. So I worked through the fact that I had basically created for myself my own personal torment nexus. I applied for an ATProto grant, which I did get, and that helped with hosting, and that helped too. I also found some volunteers for my queue. I've had 3, but mostly 2 people who have been like really, really helping me, helping keep the queue clear. Even the many times the model's fallen over because it's running off of local infrastructure sitting in my flat. And a big part of why XBlock is still running today is due to the work of like 2 volunteers in particular. They do this really thankless anonymous work, and they stay anonymous because all moderation is inherently challenging if you start to make it about personalities and who's doing that moderation work. So they've done this work day in, day out for months, and I have so much respect for them. They just believe in what XBlock is doing, and I'd probably have given up like ages ago if it wasn't for them. Quick round of applause for them, just anyways, please. Thank you. So the second meltdown was also XBlock related. I kind of want to set the record straight about what happened with this. This was like shortly after like the massive influx of people post-election was occurring. And a combination of, so I had a post sometime around 8,000 followers where I'm like, I am way too mentally ill to have nearly 8,000 followers, and within like 6 weeks I was over 20. So yeah, that was an adjustment, suffice to say, and I kind of felt that starter packs were like the vector that people were finding me. With the benefit of hindsight, it was probably starter packs, and also the fact that my name is on the news feed. I didn't really know how popular the news feed was at the time because I had no analytics for it because I was just running it off of the feed generator boilerplate. So, I got frustrated, and I felt that like the work that I was putting into XBlock and into Bluemoji, into my feeds were just, it was something that was going to cause me to have like some kind of, mental collapse at some point. And I didn't feel like I was supported. I didn't feel like things were going to get really any better. Kind of around this whole time, there was a specific moderation challenge that happened with the trans community. Let's just leave it at that. And it sort of resulted in the message getting muddled a little bit. I was mostly feeling unsupported and upset from the engagement I was starting to get on Blue Sky, mostly from people who were new to the platform who didn't understand that I was just a volunteer building these things out. But it was also it was a moment because I kind of became really worried that third-party moderation projects like XBlock were going to be held up as the solution to any more involved moderation than what Blue Sky PBC is able to do it themselves. So, and I didn't want to be held up as an exemplar of this technology if I didn't feel supported. So I put XBlock on hiatus, I put Bluemoji on hiatus, which is honestly probably the stupidest thing that I did, but honestly. And I went back to Mastodon. And for a few beautiful days, I just didn't care about my personal torment nexus. But I worked through it. And eventually, I got back to building things because I got bored on the Fediverse, so I wanted to come back to Blue Sky. And I came back, and I restarted my projects. And thanks again to the continued work of my two volunteers who kind of kept XBlock rolling while I was not really paying attention to it and continuing to do that work. Everything was being basically manually labeled at the time. Yeah, I worked through it. So the thread that connects both of these is a lack of support. Even as I watch my projects become load-bearing, everyone's seen this XKCD. It's like XKCD 2347. There's this tiny little block at the bottom that's supporting up all this infrastructure, and it's talking about dependencies in like a software development context, but really it's kind of dependencies in general. It can be felt as. I felt like I was that block, and I felt like the load on top of that block was getting heavier and heavier as the days progressed, and I just didn't feel supported, and that's, I think, where a lot of those anxieties came about. And so I come to one of my first points, the need to support third-party projects, particularly ones dealing with moderation. The promise of community moderation will never be fully fulfilled if we don't support third-party moderators in very real ways. If we can't make that work rewarding for community moderators in some way beyond just good vibes, and especially so if they're meant to be significant guard against bad actors targeting our communities on Blue Sky. My lived experience of composable moderation, it's scary, it's risky, it's very labor intensive. And XBlock is composable moderation on easy mode. Like, half of the labeling is done completely automated. My criteria for labeling a post is very specific. Is it a screenshot? Then it gets a label. Is it not? Then it's not. It's very non-controversial. It's probably like one of the least controversial bits of moderation happening on the site in some ways. But I still had 2 meltdowns because of it. Like, it's challenging to run these things, and I can't even begin to imagine how challenging it is for people who run actually content-focused moderation, who have to get into the weeds with discourse and try and get context from these moderation decisions that they're doing, some of which will not be popular, some of which will like inevitably tick off a huge cohort of people who are trying to use the platform and think that they have a right to use the platform in whatever way they want. It's challenging work, and we need to find ways of supporting people who are doing it. I'm going to switch gears for a bit and talk about Grays. I'm a huge fan of Grays. Basically, when I was trying to create a new model for XBlock, Devin really helped me out to, oh, thank you. I was trying to try a new version of XBlock because I realized that screenshots that had multiple social networks in them were actually being missed because the model was splitting the probability between both of them. So if you had, a just Facebook screenshot would score higher than a screenshot with Facebook and Twitter. So I tried to change how I was training things and try and put like a new approach into doing that work. And I was close to giving up. And at the time, XBlocks, like the fire hose had like surged in volume, and it was really, really challenging to be able to parse the entire fire hose, which is what XBlock does. Devin came along and helped me get that working in a sustainable way, and I'm still using code from that experience, and it's running today, even as I'm half a world away talking at a conference. I really truly believe that Graze is like the next wave of ATProto code. It's one of the most exciting projects on ATProto that I've seen. It's really, really good. I have a post up here talking about how I created the Trending Canadian news feed, which is a variant of the news feed. I built it like sitting in bed watching TV on my phone in like 5 minutes. And it doesn't have a huge audience so far. I just released it like just the other day, but for the people who would find a source of just Canadian news valuable, I'm from Western Canada, by the way, not from the UK. I moved to the UK in 2011, which is why I have this funny accent. It's a very valuable way to be able to create these things, and I think it expands like, dramatically on like the work that was originally sort of, available through Skyfeed. One thing it has, and that the Grace team has been working on, is being able to turn on monetization for your feeds with one click. You can set your cost per millis, basically the cost per 1,000 impressions, to whatever you want. It gives you detailed analytics of how many times your feed has been viewed, how many times it's been refreshed, and from that you can kind of get a sense of how potentially lucrative it could be. Graze takes a 30% cut, you get a 70% cut, which is really pretty good in terms of online marketing. They give you analytics, and most importantly, like, I work in news media. I've known a lot of ad people in my life, and Graze don't strike me as ad people. I'd probably be running a million miles in the other direction if they came across as ad people. They're also like very serious Blue Sky users, and they kind of understand and have a sensitivity to kind of the needs of the platform in some very serious ways. And the people wanting to monetize their feeds on Graze are Blue Sky users. Some of the feeds that are considering this are in this list here. And some of them are like really well-known feeds that people probably have pinned to their app. I don't have my feeds in here because I have that labeling requirement, and I think it's really important to be able to label promoted content. But if I did monetize them, I have about 120,000 daily average users for the newsfeed on average, which would substantially, almost double Graze's ad inventory. And that's before it became noticeable that you could do this, and other feed creators would try and do the same. It would really kind of help push along this argument from their side. Feed creators are being abundantly cautious here. We're not running headlong into this. We're being very measured about how we approach this, because we know that it is a thing that people will possibly take umbrage about. So there's a lot of caution being presented with this. So I think there's really real value here. This is some stats for a post that I put into the rotating section of the newsfeed. Part of the reason why I made the newsfeed in the first place was to help lift and elevate queer journalists. I'm a member of the Trans Journalists Association, and I have a deep amount of respect for the work the TJA does. And Queer AF is an org that I've always looked up to. I think they're doing incredible work in telling LGBTQ stories. And they had a yearly funding drive. And just on a whim, I decided to put that as like the rotating post in the news feed. And yeah, they blew past their fundraising goal like 2 days before it was like the deadline for it. And I just did because it was a good thing to do. It does, however, really show how effective this might be for people who are wanting to promote their posts. It was viewed by nearly 200,000 unique users, 1.35 million times in like 3 days. So here's some like just general numbers and how like I'm seeing like what it would mean to me if I actually monetize my news feed. I average about 1 million feed requests a day, which is the unit that Graze calculates ad sales from. A feed request is a refresh of the feed when you've hit it, or when you reach the limit of the post returned by the app view. That is, you see an ad every 50 posts if there's one campaign running at full utilization. Users refresh the feed about 9 times per day on average, meaning they would see about 9 promoted posts in their total daily usage of the feed. Using extremely conservative calculations, the feed could rake north of 24,000 USD per month. And that's at like a $1 CPM, which is like absolutely rock bottom. I can increase it anywhere from 6 to 10-fold. And each feed can also run several campaigns, which, if you take all this together, is just like an absolutely ridiculous amount of money that Blue Sky has suddenly generated for people building things on this platform, just by letting Grace do this. But like, yeah, I could, if this happened, I could suddenly get like a lot of money, and that'd be really cool, and I could maybe actually afford to buy a flat in central London, heavens. But you know, I love engineering. I don't want to retire off of the back of my news feed earnings. I don't want to be selfish with that money. I realize how much news media as an industry kind of traumatizes my community on like a daily basis. What I need for the world is to get better for queer people like myself. What I need is for my social media experience to be safe and to protect voices like mine. And so to that end, I plan to set up a trust to distribute funds paid into it to community initiatives that help with these goals. I don't want the creator of the next X Block to have a panic attack due to a lack of support while they're trying to enjoy their partner's music. I want us to build the most vibrant and effective ecosystem of apps and services we can dream of together as a community. Which is why I'm announcing this tentative trust. I've done absolutely no legwork around this yet. This is very, 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 very early days, and if I can't end up monetizing my fees, it probably won't take off. But this is the dream that I'm trying to present here. I'm dead serious about this. I want to help monetize my feed to help make Graze sustainable as a software project, because they still get their 30% cut. And I want to help do this in a way that's perhaps the most audacious attempt to fund Blue Sky community endeavors. I want to take a large chunk of my ad earnings and give it to the people who are doing important work. And I want to make ATPro development sustainable and rewarding. I don't mean in any way to compete with Skyfund or free air feeds. I don't see the projects I'll fund as being in the same interest areas. It's a different lane. I want to focus mainly on moderation and LGBTQ user safety. And I don't want to take donations. I just want to directly pay for my community's needs via the success of my custom feeds. This is because long-running projects like Labelers need more than just the occasional grant. They need reliable income so they can pay people for the moderation work they do. Imagine if we had labelers that paid moderators a salary to endure the constant challenges that role requires. Imagine if new projects could have their hosting costs taken care of while they get off the ground. Imagine if the trans community could fund our own infrastructure and moderation teams, sensitive to the needs and cultural environment we exist in right now. And you're probably skeptical about my ambition with this, and I wouldn't blame you. I'm working on this idea, and it's scary and ambitious, but I think it's necessary. But if I did manage to pull this off, if I did create a trust that paid out to ATProto projects focusing on the LGBTQ community, I have an idea of the first one I would invest in. I am a card-carrying member of the North Sky Cooperative. Thank you. I won't be talking too much about North Sky because I'm pretty much just like a developer for it. I've been helping with the front end, particularly for the Migrator tool. So, and I wouldn't want, it's because it's for a co-op, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the co-op about things that like I'm not really expert in. But if you don't know about North Sky, it's a new social cooperative based in Canada, intended to enable vulnerable and marginalized communities to use Blue Sky in a way that attempts to protect them through both a combination of innovative technologies, data sovereignty, and just sensitivity to the needs of our community. A lot of the people putting North Sky together are very recognizable queer voices on Blue Sky, and this is entirely a community-driven endeavor. Our goal is we're very much inspired by Rudy and the work that Black Sky has done, and we're really I can't even begin to express like the depth of gratitude we have for the work that Black Sky has done in kind of creating this path for us. We want to set up parallel infrastructure similar to what Black Sky is doing, focusing on the needs of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community and other groups typically neglected by mainstream social media platforms who are particularly at risk from the ever-present geopolitical situation. Starting with PDSs, moving to moderation infrastructure, and depending on how things go, setting up more things like possibly a relay, possibly an app view. We're very much thinking we want to have a lot of our own stuff. As a worker-run co-op, we hope to give our users a serious voice in how we operate and to approach moderation with a sensitivity. And they're ambitious goals, but we're trying. And trans people won't be silenced by this or any other administration. And if it means we have to set up an entire parallel infrastructure, an entire damn social network, then you bet your asses we'll do that. And that's, I think, what's driving a lot of this. In closing, I don't have any notes for this one. This is a mural. It's a ghost sign in my former neighborhood. I walk past this every single day going to work. Before I came out as trans, I would see this every day as I was walking. And it was the sort of thing, Courage is a brewery in London, and this is just like an ad, but it's been left here over the years, and it's persisted, and it's continued to be there. And I think a lot of people in my neighborhood take it as a kind of just like a mantra, almost like something that guides them. And as I was coming out as a 6'3", lime green wearing trans woman working in the British news media, it gave me a lot of hope. And I think kind of if I can leave you with one message, it's take courage. We need to take courage going into the next year because a lot of things will be really difficult. I think none of us are oblivious to this fact. We need to have courage as business people. We need to have courage as developers. We need to have courage as educators. Take courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ændra. All right, do we have any questions? Come on up. Besides, what are you up to with Bluemoji next? What would you? How can we help you with Bluemoji? Because I think there's a number of people who are interested also in that.
Well, I would. I started Bluemoji kind of as an attempt to understand how lexicons work. It's one of my continuing to do Blue Sky stuff so I can at some point write about it a bit better. And it kind of predated lexicon community. I think it would be I would welcome lexicon community taking over Bluemoji as a project if Nick's around. Yeah.
Cool, we will definitely tell Nick.
Okay, thank you for your talk. It was really, really good. I think, again, to say it, we have a unique opportunity here because there are so many builders who are building. What can we do to help? Is it as much as following these feeds, or is there things that you want to see inside applications? Yeah, that would help the community.
From like the builder perspective, I think when communicating with people about the projects you do on Blue Sky, just expressing to people that these are projects that are being often built by volunteers, by contributors who are really just wanting to make the platform a better place. And sometimes just, I think kind of like one of the biggest challenges moving into like the next year is it's less a, technology kind of challenge, but more of a user education challenge. My experience with the newsfeed and with the interactions I've had with people from the newsfeed is user literacy on Blue Sky, particularly amongst the cohort that I've joined since about November. It's a challenge, and I think the more we do together as a community of developers to improve user literacy around these topics, I think ultimately the better the things we make will be. and better understood they will be by our users. Thank you.
Hey, I know you mentioned that you're running XBlock in AWS now, and you've got grants for it and everything. But can you give an estimate of like just what the throughput on that is at this point? Because I imagine you're looking at like every screenshot, like just order of magnitude. What does it take to process everything that you're seeing in the network?
Well, okay, so I think I parse in the neighborhood of like, I'll say check is about like 400,000 images like a day sort of thing. I'm just running it off of like a, it's like a GTX 980 Ti or something. It's like a 8-year-old graphics card just from like a very aging gaming PC. And the fact that like I'm able to basically parse the entire fire hose like with this is like really impressive. That's like one of the things that excites me the most about ATPro development is that you can stand up these like experimental services using just like random computers lying around your flat, and you can provide a useful service to people on the platform. I think it's really cool.
The home lab dream.
Yeah.
Hi. So mostly a comment. I get you about the meltdown. I run the pronounce labeler, and I had to deal with this myself. And just like you, I would say, like it's not even moderation related. It's very much like being on easy mode. Everything is like automated. You like a post, but I've had to deal with like lots of requests, a huge amount of attention. The network has grown in ways that are like very unexpected. Like suddenly we had a ton of Brazilians, and then they all left. And then suddenly we had a ton of Americans from after the election. And yeah, so from this perspective, I get it. Running a labeler has not really been expensive for me. It's not really been so much of a cost issue, but there's definitely something about a single person will manage this thing, which is kind of like very important on the network. And it's like everyone like trusts me with their pronoun label, which I could change when I want. Labelers have access to a little thing called hide, the hide label, and everyone trusts us with this. So yeah, there's like, I very much like what the Blue Sky team does, but there's something to be said about how it gives a lot of responsibilities to small devs, and we don't get much in return, and sometimes you just want to kind of give up, and that's how projects die, and they get abandoned. I'm curious to see what North Sky could do. Like, is there a project for maybe labeler? Because there's not many third-party moderation labelers. It's almost felt like labelers have mostly just been used for just novelty stuff, like labeling yourself with like a Harry Potter house and all. So yeah, I think it's also something that could be worth investing in. Just yeah, I don't know, I'm curious.
So yeah, standing up so at the moment we're just getting the PDSs kind of stable and resilient, and we're hopefully inviting the initial beta users to test the PDSs. We're a little bit hesitant to still because you can't transfer back once you've transferred out of like the Blue Sky PDSs. But kind of like once we get all the PDS side stuff like working really safely and stably, I think that's our first priority, simply because of sort of like the data sovereignty issues that's attached to that and the kind of concerns that people in the trans community have right now. But moderation tooling is definitely something that we're very, very seriously considering and very much looking into. It's probably like we're not entirely sure how it's going to look at this point, but it is something that we're paying like a lot of attention to and really considering what our options are with it.
Well, I'll start with a thank you for all that you've done, and hard relate on the meltdown factor potential. Not to worry us all collectively too much, but what are some of the big challenges you see coming up in the next year, and how can we collectively help, and also how can we collectively find and build a helpful community that doesn't leave any single person as the single point of failure for a needed service in our modern decentralized digital world that is going to sit on all of our backs?
That's a good question. I think in some ways, as we build new services and as new services come online, having a sense of, I think the understanding of the challenge domain of setting up one of these improved quite a lot since I set up mine. I think people have a much better understanding of how much labor now goes into them, because we've had a few examples of that. But I think, yeah, the one thing I think that would help is as things I think have scaled to a point where it's less easy to do one of these things reliably as like an individual. I think the more we can work collaboratively and start doing things as groups, setting them up, I think ultimately the easier and more sustainable they'll be. So yeah, I think in terms of work with people, and if you have a good idea, find other people who are excited about the idea and start doing it together. Like it's probably will be a lot less meltdown inducing than trying to go it your own at this point, especially with the volume of the network at this point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Andra. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will move on. All right. Thank you very much, Andra.